Hi, folks, and this is a Fireside Chat. I'm Christopher Penn. With me today is Cathy McPhillips from the Marketing AI Institute, and we're talking about the uses of artificial intelligence and machine learning within the space of marketing, the domain of marketing. If you have comments or questions about anything as you're watching this, go ahead and just use the comments box on whatever platform you're on. If you're on Facebook, you're going to have to go to the little thing here, streamyard.com/Facebook. If you want your name to be seen, if you just want to be an anonymous person, that's fine. You can just leave comments, however. So, Cathy, welcome, and tell us very briefly about who you are, what you do, and why you're here.
Well, I'm here because you asked me to be on, which makes me very excited. I am Cathy McPhillips. I'm the Chief Growth Officer at the Marketing AI Institute, and I've been with the company about 10 weeks. And I think that, I'm excited to be here because I come with a marketer's perspective with this AI stuff. And I work with Paul Reitzer and Mike Kaput, and they're so in the weeds on AI that I'm excited to kind of tell you some of the questions that I've been asking them for the past 10 weeks incessantly. So, yeah.
In your first 10 weeks, what have you found from the perspective of a marketer to be some of the obstacles? Because one of the things that we've seen, I'm going to pull up a slide here. This is from the CMO survey from February 2021. They asked about 500 CMOs. How, if at all, has your investment in AI and machine learning influenced how much time your marketers are able to spend? So, the impact of AI. And what you see here is of those companies that are doing something with AI, most of them have not seen very much impact at all. Like, so they're trying it out and it's just not happening for them. So when you think about, again, from the marketer's perspective, this chart, why is this?
Well, I think a couple things. One, I think this artificial intelligence, the term scares people. I mean, guilty. A year ago, 2 years ago, if I heard that, I'd be like, that's just we don't need that. We like the personal touch. We want to be more involved. We don't want machines to do a lot of the things. I don't. You know me well enough to know that like my biggest thing is customer experience, and I want community, and I want to have that relationship. And will AI jeopardize that? Well, what I've learned is that no, it actually will give you more time to do those sorts of things because it'll take away a lot of the data-driven, repetitive things and give you more time to focus on what you really want to focus on. I think between that and people, there is bias. We'll get into that a little bit with AI, and people worry about what will this machine tell me. And I think there's a whole thing of like, will I become obsolete? Will machine take my job away? So I think if
And
people are onboarding AI, I would ask them, are you really? Is what you're using really an artificial intelligence solution? And are you doing it right? Do you have the right people doing it? Are you investing? And just because you have a technology doesn't mean you're doing it right, or even doing it, because if you're not having someone behind it to use it, then you're not really using it.
and in terms of the different technologies that are out there, there's natural language processing, regression analysis, all sorts of really fun and technical terms. What are the things that you're seeing most people trying to discuss, trying to say like, yeah, this is something that I'm excited about, or this is something that I don't understand. So what are the hot areas that, from a marketer's perspective, you think people should be paying more attention to?
Well, I'm going to kind of answer this in a roundabout way, but I've been doing some Google ads around MACON, our event that's coming up in a few weeks. And, I did AI and and analysis, AI in social media, AI in content creation, AI in agencies. And AI in social media has been the one that's surfaced the most and has gotten the most impression. So I think there's a big opportunity there for social media. How can we, it's just such a, it's a time suck. But to do it right, you need to invest a lot of time in social media. So what can you shortcut? What can you streamline? What can AI help you at least get from point A to point B, not from point A to finish, but how can it help you take a few hours off your plate? And then content creation, Mike Kaput, our chief content officer, posted something on LinkedIn today. He wrote a blog post a few weeks ago. He actually didn't write it, AI wrote it. And we read it and we're like, this is really good. So just being able to start drafting some content for you, whether it's social, whether it's a blog post. And then funny enough, last week, I'm not sure if you were in this conversation, but someone posted on LinkedIn about how AI really doesn't work for marketers. So I chimed in and just said, here are some use cases on how AI might be beneficial for you. And he wrote back and he said, I tried to write a blog post and AI is never going to give me a final version of my blog post that I want. And I was like, well, it's not really supposed to give you the final version. And if you don't try to get that first draft, you're never going to get a final version anyway. So you have to at least jump in and get started. Like machine learning doesn't say we're going to give you this beautiful thing at the end. It's going to say we'll take you, we'll keep learning from you and making it better and better each time. So yeah, then I just stopped the conversation because you know how social media goes.
Well, yeah, so inevitably somebody ends up, insulting somebody else. But I don't know if I agree with that in terms of what, natural language processing in particular is able to do. This is a funny example. So this is a press release that I found on the newswire from Champion Plumbing, right, in Oklahoma City. I have no connection to these people. I have no idea who they are. They just were the unlucky random draw that morning on the newswire. And you can see this whole press release about, plumbing and trees, and like basically they're saying like don't plant trees near your house because it'll mess up your plumbing. And what I did was I said, okay, I'm gonna slice off the press release in half, and I'm gonna get rid of the second half, and I'm gonna feed it to one of these models and say, you try to autocomplete the rest of the press release. So here's the, I should probably share my screen because you can't see that. So here's the press release, right? And it's not terrible, right? We encourage our neighbors to plant and maintain trees, but it's critical to be smart where they're located. And then, another wall of text from the person who's speaking. So I fed it to the model. This model is poorly branded, named GPT-J6B. AI needs to work on naming things. And I said, I'm going to cut off the second half. What you autocomplete the rest of the release. So there in the top of this, let's make this bigger, is the original release. And then the bottom here, the non-bolded text is what it came up with, right? And it's a nice bullet list. Plant fruit and nut trees at least 12 feet away from the house. Maintain your tree roots. So, keep your plant mulch so the tree roots don't have to go dig down as far. And I was like, this is not a first draft. Like,
Right.
this is almost ready to go.
Yeah. And first
Um,
of all, it's a lot prettier with
well,
those with that
yeah,
bulleted list.
exactly. So, to the person who's saying, this is, it's never going to create a finished product. I don't know that that's going to be true for, for the long term. It is true now,
Hmm.
um, but all of these models are getting so much better, so much more quickly, that I don't know that holds true. I mean, so for somebody to have those beliefs, how do you think something like this is convincing enough to get them to go, maybe I should be hopping on the bandwagon?
Absolutely. I mean, and to the other point is like, okay, so you go in here and you add a bullet or you tweak a bullet or something, and then the machine sees what you did, and the next time it's going to know that. So you have to give the computer data, the machine data for it to know and learn. So next time it's going to be better, and you can't expect this perfect thing without you putting in some information. And those
Yeah.
are the kind of things
Now,
that I've, learned and said, okay, we can give this a shot.
I'm curious for you to dig in a bit more. You said with regard to social media, what is it that you're hearing people asking about the use of AI within social media?
I think from like, not from an engagement standpoint, but more of the distribution standpoint. You write a blog post, you want to do a LinkedIn post, a Twitter post, a Facebook post, and different versions. So maybe one blog post might be 20 different versions of a social media post without duplicating something. And you want to pull out different snippets or use different hashtags and all these different things. Like, how can AI help me do that? Because the blog post took me 10 hours to write, and social media is taking me another hour to 2 hours to draft, to publish, to schedule. So how can AI help me in that? Like, can it go through and just do a quick sweep of the post and just draft something up so I can just go in and edit that, save an hour of my life, and then um, go in and say, can you even schedule it for me? Because here's the optimal times that our community is engaging with our posts. How can AI help us there? And just constantly learn. You 6 months ago, 10 a.m. might have been a great time for you to be on Twitter, but the machine's learning that your engagement's happening more at 2 in the morning because no one else is on. And those are the kind of things that me as a marketer, I've gone in and I've looked at that data and said, let's shift up our times. But how can the machine actually tell me, well, you're looking at it this way, but actually try this instead?
How much value do you think there is, though, in marketers trying to not necessarily just use AI for creation and working with their own stuff, but trying to understand other people's AI. So, the classic thing, for example, in SEO, is people have been spending years of their lives trying to understand how Google does things. People spent years of their lives trying to understand how Facebook and LinkedIn and all these different social networks, what their underlying algorithms and models do. And for those who can read the technical stuff, you can extract a lot of value and come up with tactics that map to the way the underlying machines work. Do you feel like that marketers are in a position, like even in your own efforts as in the last 10 weeks, do you feel like you're in a position now where if somebody handed you, some documentation about how LinkedIn is using its natural language processing, you could say, ah, now I know what to change in my LinkedIn strategy.
I mean, is it trying to like work with the LinkedIn algorithm? Because I mean, or is it really trying? Is that beneficial for you and your business and your customers? Sure. I mean, I go and read it. I probably read it anyways because I'm a big nerd and I read stuff. But I don't know if I'd invest. You're not trying to learn the technology. You're not trying to learn AI. And you and I talked about this a few weeks ago when we were just on the phone. That I'm not. I don't need to learn about AI and be a data scientist and understand all that. I just need to learn how AI is helping me. I don't know if you said this analogy or I did, but to drive a car, you don't need to be an auto mechanic. You don't need to know how a car works to drive it. You just need to drive the car. So if I know how AI can help me, I don't really. That's pretty much the end of it. I don't need to know all the ins and outs unless I really want to.
Gotcha. Because I think it's interesting what you hear a lot about particularly in more technical pieces of documentation is you learn more about the inputs, like the underlying algorithm. There's only really a handful of algorithms that these big tech companies could use at scale because they've got to do it for millions or billions of people. So they can't use the fanciest stuff that there is out there because they simply don't have enough computational cost. But there's plenty of it's sort of like the analogy I use is a blender. Like if you know what to put in the blender, you know what a blender does, then what comes out of the blender shouldn't really be a surprise. Like if you put in sand, a fruit smoothie is not going to come out the other end, right? Um, and so there's this interesting post that has since been deleted, which I find very interesting, by the technical head of Instagram, saying, "Here's what the signals we look at in rough order of importance for what how we show things to people." So post itself signals like how quickly people are liking, commenting, sharing, and saving a post. And they matter in Explore more than they do in Feed or Stories. Your history of interaction with someone, your activity, what you do, and how people interact with you, and interaction with people who are about their posts. And I find that again, you may not necessarily need a data science or an AI engineering background to read this and go, oh,
Hmm.
so these are the things in order that you take into account. So as a marketer, when you read this now, does that change how you think about how you should be using Instagram to promote stuff?
For sure. I mean,
Why aren't more marketers doing this then?
I don't know. And why they take this down? Because people are trying to game the system?
I don't know. I speculate, and this is pure speculation. I have no basis in fact for this. But I speculate that he gave away a little too much information.
Sure.
Or didn't have the appropriate approvals to give it away. But there's a lot of information here. Like, oh, well, if you know this about what Instagram's model is taking into account,
Hmm.
then you know that what you need to do. So if there's a post, for example, that you need to have really do well, the fact that they say here's how many and how quickly people like, comment, and share, you may want to send out a text alert to your fans. Like, I need you all to like this post right now. Right? You
Hmm.
run some ads, spin some ads really quick on it, or you send out an email or a notification to your Slack community, but whatever it is, the fact that how many and how quickly is the most important signal is the velocity algorithm means that you can now go and take advantage of it. And so again, from the perspective of a marketer, why don't more marketers pay attention to the technical stuff? There's no code here. There's no math. We're not asking
Sure.
anybody to do math.
Yeah.
but this could change your social media strategy. All those marketers who are looking for AI in social media, like, they're giving it to you when they don't delete it on you.
Right, right. Unless you're Chris Penn and screenshot it and save it.
You know.
Yeah, totally. I mean, this is such useful information because, we're working on that right now. We're trying to build our Instagram strategy for the Institute, and it's just like, I'm like, I could take this back to our team and say, "Okay, here's what we're gonna do," you know?
Exactly, and something, our CEO, Katie Rivera is always saying is like, "So what?" Like, here's you have all this AI, so what? Well, when you're decomposing other people's AI and trying to figure out how it works, the so what is, how their stuff works better,
Mhm,
so that you can take advantage of it. There was another paper, I don't have it handy, LinkedIn published. LinkedIn actually is, I think, one of the most interesting social networks because they publish and share a lot of their underlying technology. Like, they tell you exactly how they do things, how they train their models and things. But again, marketers don't read them. Now, in that case, I think it's fair to give marketers a break because their papers are really technical, like really like there's calculus and linear algebra and all through them. But if you can decode it, you can recognize, oh, so for example, it's not just what you post on LinkedIn that determines, what gets seen. It's the language you use on your profile. It's
mm,
the language of the people in their profiles and your first degree connections around you. So, like, if all your friends on LinkedIn, all your first degree connections are, talking about e-commerce, and you're over here talking about AI, there's kind of this mismatch, and LinkedIn will say, well, they're not really interested in AI, so we're not going to show your post to them. But if
right.
they show some interactivity, and then one of the things I thought was kind of a cool dead giveaway was it looks at the language you use and other people use in comments, like when you're commenting on other posts. So if you are engaging with, political content on there, and all you're talking about is so and so did this thing, it thinks that that's what you're about then. And so then when you publish your thing about the marketing AI conference, it's like, well, you're posting something that has nothing to do with what you talk about most of the time.
Right.
So again, I would wish more marketers would read these things.
So I think it's a new side business of Trust Insights is to have you analyze, decompose all of those into marketer speak so we can all understand it and pay you to do that for us. Get Katie on that.
Um, we'll do what we can. And there are folks who actually make a living, and that's sort of their specialty. One gentleman comes to mind is Bill Slawski over in SEO community. He runs a blog, SEO by the Sea, and his whole thing is he reads and analyzes in detail every patent that Google puts out and every academic paper. And he's like, okay, this is what Google is doing based on what they have patented. So if you read his stuff, he's like, okay, he invests like a ton of time on it, but again, I think there's a niche here for folks who are in marketing interested in AI. Again, you don't have to be a coder. You do have
Hmm.
to be able to read academic papers. Um, okay, let's move on to something else. You had said that earlier on, um, a bit of a focus on like bias and ethics and what's going on with AI. What have you found out in your first 10 weeks about that topic?
That a lot of marketers take what AI, what the machine is giving them, and they take it at face value, and that really is not a really good decision. And Paul Rates, our CEO, and I have talked a lot about. He has this whole model of marketer plus machine, where a marketer needs a machine, but a machine needs a marketer. So there has to be someone, a real live person on the end of that after the machine tells you something to say, is this true? Is this beneficial? And are we comfortable using the data in this way? So, whether it's implicit bias or whether, just there's a lot more to it than just taking what the machine is telling you at face value. And there's Karen Howe from the MIT Tech Review who's speaking at MACON, who's getting into this topic. And she's been phenomenal. I've read a lot of her stuff, and she just constantly pushes back, saying, "Are you sure? Are you sure? Are we doing this right?" And especially now, where marketers are, where if you're talking about AI, even if you're not using AI, you're ahead of most people. And as this continues to grow, we have this opportunity and a big responsibility as marketers leading this AI charge that we need to this set some ground rules and set this up now to do it the right way. So I'm excited to hear her speak at the event about that.
What are some of the ground rules you think need to be set up?
I don't know. And I think that's one of the reasons I want to hear from her is um, just putting some, some checks in place. And I don't know who the right people are to do that, whether it's making sure we have a data scientist somewhere in our team and our agency and our, some type of partner that can help us do that. Um, or having someone look at the and just an analyst within our company look at the data and say, is this right?
Mhm. How do you reconcile that, particularly when you have things where there aren't necessarily always good right answers? So, a real simple example, social networks, Facebook in particular, but social networks in general have received a lot of criticism, much of it very valid, that they are essentially breeding grounds for misinformation, and for just outright garbage. Particularly around the pandemic, but politics in general. How do you balance that as uh, of saying like, yes, you have the right to free expression, even if what you're expressing is completely incorrect.
Hmm.
Um, with things like, hey, by 40% of the population failing to take action on this thing, you will eventually create a mutant strain of SARS-CoV-2 that will probably reinfect us all. So,
Hmm.
how do you balance the public good with the individual when it comes to the way these models are trained? Because right now, no one's doing much of anything on this front, and the outcomes we're getting are not great.
I mean, this might be like a really silly answer, but I feel like if you have that gut feeling that I don't know if this is right or are we sure? Like if you I just feel like we as marketers need to be good humans and just make sure we're doing good by our company and by our customers. If it gives you pause, you probably need to dig a little further and you need to do a little bit more. I think you should do that anyways, even if you are confident with the data. And what but I just feel like we have to just be good people, you know? But
I think that
I don't know. And that's some of the things, that's like I said, I'm coming into this as and it's funny because I've been marketing for 30 years, but this is all new to me. So I'm coming in with like an expertish level of marketing with no experience in AI. So trying to learn that and being a customer of our company, just trying to understand it. It's like there's a lot of questions that I need answered, and
mhm,
that's one of them. You say, "What do you do?" I'm like, "I'm figuring it out as we're going along," which is how I've kind of lived the last 30 years of my marketing world. Is just you just figure it out.
right. Do you think that some of these things, at least for big things that have societal impact, might need to go through a review process? Something, for example, with clinical trials, you can't just release a drug on the market without, at least in the United States, the FDA saying, "Hey, you should probably provide some evidence that this thing works the way it says it works, and that it's not actually just going to go and kill a whole bunch of people."
Hmm.
There is no oversight like that in artificial intelligence. Should there be?
Well, we have talked about, within our team, we have kind of like an ad hoc advisory board of sorts, where he'll reach out to someone like you or Tim Hayden or, can you look at this or what do you think about this? Or some CMOs that we know that we're making sure we're getting gut checks from them, just saying, are we on the right path or what do you think of this? But yeah, I think there should be some checks in place along the way.
How much of the problems do you think are because of uh, upstream issues with the people creating the AI?
Well, I do know that we have talked to some folks about, that wanting to partner with us on something, and the team has pushed back and said, either one, um, there just doesn't seem like it's a good fit for a number of reasons. Two, what you're doing really isn't AI, um, and so just trying to make sure that we're working with the right people and what they're doing is something that we believe in.
Dig more into that. So, what about the people who are tell me about those companies that say they're doing AI, but they're not. What's the story? You don't have to name names, obviously, but what's the story behind that?
Well, I think that some, and as marketers, back like I'm kind of jumping off topic a little bit, but like way back before when I was working with CMI, prior to that, I was a CMI customer. I was reading the blog and I'm like, we're doing content marketing. And once I started at CMI, I'm like, we are not doing content marketing at all. We're publishing promotional blog posts. So, you just learn And I think some companies and some marketers think, oh, because we're using a marketing automation tool, we're using AI, or we're using this tool, we're using AI. But that's not, you're using a technology, you're not using an AI powered technology. So, and I
Does it
think some
matter to the
marketer,
marketer?
it should. I mean, it should. If you know that the machine's going to help you in a more beneficial way by learning what you're doing and learning what your customer needs, then yes, in the long run, that's going to save you a boatload of time and give you
Okay.
more, better outcomes.
Okay. Because in 2018, the Financial Times did an assessment of 100 companies that said they did AI, that their products were AI enabled, and found that 35% of them were just outright lying. Like there is literally not a scrap of technology. They had an outsourced, cube farm somewhere in like Kyrgyzstan that was doing all the stuff behind the scenes.
But it's
And
good for SEO to have machine learning in your in your website, right?
and and therein ultimately the question is, if the customer gets the benefit at the end of the day, does it actually matter whether a machine did it or not?
I mean, I see your point. Is the cost of outsourcing all this stuff is comparable in price to using an AI technology? I mean, I guess what you do, you right. But I mean, I guess I would say if you want to know really what your customers want and what you're going to save time on, and you as a business leader want to know more, I feel like we got to get on this AI train eventually and start using some of these technologies. Because what you're
Yeah,
you're giving you're giving this other group, this partner of yours, all this data, and they're just sending it back. Are you sure it's what's right? Are they doing what you want them to do?
right. But if you're a marketer who's not a technologist, do you necessarily know what you want them to do? Or do you just want them to say like, "Hey, I just need my social post. I just need more people to like my tweets."
So they just see that the more they're getting their engagements up, so everything's good, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Because one of the things that I wonder about a lot when it comes to the use of AI and, particularly with bias and ethics is machines write their own software, but they do it from the data we provide them, and they do it using algorithms in many cases that we specify, which means that if we're doing it wrong, we're going to teach that to the machines. The
Right.
most powerful and unpleasant example I can come up with is when you look at this is Facebook's website. These are their core values: be bold, focus on impact, move fast, be open, build social value. At no point in here does it say make the world a better place, make people happier, improve the productivity of society, right? Even when you zoom in on a few of these values and things, we're trying to bring the world closer together. Yes, you've done that. Congratulations, you've
All
created
right.
entire tribes of people who are like wacky conspiracy theorists. So because these are the values of the company, it shows up in their AI. It shows up in how the Facebook newsfeed works. You don't have to, you can look at it and say, okay, they have done exactly what they said they were going to do. And in the process, made the world a much worse place
At
in
the
in a lot
detriment
of
of society.
exactly, because that's
Yeah.
not in the values. And so when you hear people, companies coming to you, how much is anybody thinking about, okay, have we hired people who are biased in a way that's would be generally accepted as not acceptable? Has anybody looked at the data going in? Has anybody looked at the data coming out? Do you see anybody doing that kind of deep investigation?
There have been a few people we've worked with, and obviously, Paul and Mike on a much longer scale. That that's what they're doing is are you being strategic with your data? Are you using it? Are you, like you said, are you inputting it the right way? Are you teaching the machine the right way? And like you said, I mean, that's bias right there. You think you're doing it right, even with the best of intentions, but you might not be. And having someone to help you do that is an important thing to have. But yeah, I mean, there are
Is
definitely. Yeah, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
I was going to say there are definitely some companies that we've kind of shied away from because it just kind of gives you that feeling of like, I don't know if this is right. I don't know if this is an association we really want to be part of. let's just watch and see maybe in the next 6, 12 months how things change with their business, and maybe it's something that we might want to consider. But that's something that Paul, for as long as I've known him, way before I was involved, when he with his agency, that you just kind of find the people that you want to be associated with that are good people and that are working toward a good cause and
How
doing
much
things
do
for
you
the
look
right
at the
reason.
makeup of the companies themselves in terms of the people they've hired?
With when we partner with people,
With when you're looking at a company and trying to evaluate, for example, whether they're telling the truth about their AI and or whether their AI it has potential biases. When you look at the company itself, and say like, "Gosh, it." Yeah, I'll give you an example. I used to work at a company, that was based in Atlanta, and they claimed they were an equal opportunity employer, all this stuff and things like that. And you walk in the office the first day on the job, and out of the 100 employees, there's not a single black person there. I'm like, this is Atlanta. 54% of the population is black, and you're telling me you can't find a single person
right?
who's black to work here. Like, oh, yeah, but we're an equal opportunity employer. Like, no, you're not. Otherwise, you would represent the population you're in. And so one of the things that I wonder when I look at, because we will look at companies and technologies and look at the team, go to their team page and look at it and say, huh, you're all exactly the same people. It's like, something right out of Stepford Wives. It's just, you're the same person cloned over and over again.
Right.
And that makes me worry about their AI because if you have a homogenous culture
Mm.
of people, you're going to create an algorithm or a model with problems. So how much do you look at the people behind these companies?
It's a good question. I honestly don't know the answer to that question, but I do know that we talked off camera about our AI in Action series that we're starting next week, and some of the sponsors of Macon who will be on these AI in Action sessions next week. Paul got on the phone with them and talked for 30, 60 minutes and just said, "Let's talk about your AI. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about this." Doing like, we don't want to partner with someone who's saying they're using AI and they're not, for example. As far as getting into team and culture and all those sorts of things, I don't know, but it's something I'll definitely, um, me. We like when we were at CMI, that was something that Mo and I really were. It was important to us, um, with the larger Informa community. So I feel like that's something that I could bring back to the team for sure. It's a great question.
Right, because
I mean,
that
I know we
that
talk
goes
about it like in the lessons and in the certifications that those are slides saying, check out these things, but have we put it into our own practice? I would like to say yes, but I'll make sure.
what about with the conference itself, like when you're choosing speakers and things?
Oh, definitely. You know, um, and it's hard right now because it's been a lot of, we know that you're an expert. We know, like I said, Tim Hayden and Matthew Sweezy, three men. It's like, but we know that you'll give the content to our attendees that they need to know. So it's been an effort to scour the internet, talk to people that are our customers, but he's also reaching out to people that we've never talked to. A couple of our speakers are brand new to the whole team because Paul took the initiative to go out there and find folks and ask around and make sure that so is it 50-50? Is it is there a diverse audience? Could we do better? Sure, we could do better, but it's better than 2019. So we just have to continue to improve, and I think that's definitely important. But we just, it takes 12 months to plan an event, and we just have, and that gives us now September 15th. We'll start planning 2022, and that gives us a new chance to get out there and try to find out who those experts are, or train some, get somebody that the means to be that next expert.
Is the issue because there aren't enough people who are skilled in both marketing and artificial intelligence?
Probably, yeah,
Okay,
or
because
we
I mean,
just
like,
don't
there's
know. We just don't know them.
right. Because I know there's, for example, there's the whole Black in AI community, and the
Mhm.
Latinx in AI community, and the Women in AI and Women in Analytics organization, which I think is actually either in Cleveland or Cincinnati. So there's groups out there, but I know a lot of those folks are like in bioinformatics stuff, and
Right,
where these are folks who 100% know the cutting edge, but they don't work in marketing at all. They have no
for sure.
connection to marketing.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And I've been a few women in AI groups, and I'm on this Inside AI Slack channel, and I'm looking around, like you said, it's like trying to find the marketing people within those groups, and then approaching them in a way that's I would love to connect with you, not like I need something from you. So it's building relationships too. It's not just, hey, you're a Black woman who works in AI and marketing. Can you come speak at our event? Like I wouldn't do
Mhm.
that. So we have to, it's going to take a long time to build that relationship up and have them want to do that for us.
Yep. When you look at um, the audience, who is a member of the institute, who attends the conference, who is it and how has it changed in the last 3 years?
Well, I'm still diving into all that data, but what I have seen is a lot more people that are, you know, downloading our state of the industry report or downloading our beginner guides. And I look at their title and I'm like, you are so not a beginner. You are a CMO of a brand, but they're trying to like just dip their toes in the water and say, is this something I should be investing in? We've got a nice international presence, um, which I think that's been consistently growing. And I mean, I'm even trying to grow the market in Cleveland. Just how many people in Cleveland know that Paul has been around for a long time. PR 2020 has been around for a long time. The Institute, they kind of heard about it, but they haven't heard about the event. So I'm like, wow, in our own backyard, we need to expand our audience a little bit.
What are folks who are what are their top questions that they have? Obviously, the big ones are easy, like how does this stuff work? Do I need this and stuff? But what are some of the more nuanced questions that you're getting that you see as a theme?
Am I ready for this? What do I need to do with my team, with my data before I can start? Um, what does it even really mean? What is AI? I mean, just what is AI? Um,
Right.
so I think it's a lot of just that fear, and also the fear of, can I do this? And should we be doing this? But do I have time? Where do I fit? Onboarding technology alone is a time commitment. But now you're like changing your whole entire marketing strategy. And can you onboard a new technology that might help you with one small task before you overhaul your strategy? Like what I feel like you need to do both, but when can you just start with something small and then work on the bigger picture?
How do you answer to people who ask, how do I know if I'm ready for it?
I tell them to call Paul.
But I mean, just what you've learned in the last 10 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I think if it's something that if it's something you do every single week, if it's something repetitive, if it's something that you have data to support, um, and if it's just consistent, I feel like that's a good use case. It could be A/B testing subject lines, it could be drafting social media posts, it could be looking at some analytics, um, just some of those things, and versioning creative. I one of our AI in action sessions next week is with a company called Celtra, and they talk about how you can put in a piece of creative and it'll version it for all the web, all the banner ad sizes. But there are companies that do that, but how they're different is that you can go and you can manipulate where the logo is and to do certain things on the versions they pump out, but then it learns and says, okay, next time we'll know that. Where the other companies who aren't AI powered don't do that. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I did that 2 weeks ago for all our A in action and our Macon sessions. I spent a whole entire day doing creative. And I was like, that would have saved me maybe half the time. I could have done it in half the time versus 8 hours. It could have been 4 hours, and that would have been glorious because I have so many other things I need to do. So just finding that thing, um, and what don't you like doing? You know, I love doing creative ideation and putting something together, but do I like sitting there and making all the versions? Not really. Um, so usually I do it at night watching a movie, which is not a good way to spend my time either, because I should be enjoying my evenings with my family, and I'm versioning ad creative. So just what don't you like doing? What isn't fulfilling to you? I know we all have things that aren't fulfilling that we just have to do because it's part of our jobs. What's repetitive, and what do you have data to support that a machine can help you?
How do you answer people when they ask the perennial buy or build question? Like, should we go out and just get a vendor, or should we try and build this ourselves? What do you think is the criteria that makes sense to you?
I think from an AI standpoint, if people haven't figured this out yet and there are companies that are working on it, I feel like why would you start your own? I mean, someone like you could, but do you have the team? Do you have the team that could do that? Are you investing in the right people? Um, go see what other technology companies are doing first is what I would say.
Okay. Yeah, the decision we usually factor on is, A, we're cheap because we're a small business, so we're like, "Okay, if we can build it ourselves, we will." Uh, and more important, if it's something that is ancillary, like, I just want like your example of ad creative, that's never gonna be a core competency of ours.
Hmm.
So there's no reason to build that technology. It doesn't, somebody else has solved that problem. But if it's gonna be something that is core to what we do, part of the secret sauce,
Hmm.
I personally feel like that's risky to have in the hands of a vendor. Even no matter how good the vendor is, um, I feel like that's something that you don't want to be held hostage to by a vendor.
Right.
So, okay. So to wrap up here, um, where can we find out more about the conference itself?
The conference itself can be found at Macon, MAICON.ai, and that will take you to the homepage. And there's, our agenda, our sessions, speakers, everything's up there. Yeah, so it's in September 13th and 14th. And yesterday we did a lot of the filming and everything, and it's I'm really excited about it.
Excellent. What are you looking forward to most?
One, I'm excited because we're using SwapCard, which is an AI powered solution for our platform for the event. And the nice thing about that is that, say I connect with you and I connect with Katie, if she's coming to the event, then the algorithm will say, okay, they're looking at folks in this industry, or they're looking at this job level or function or whatever, and they'll say, why don't you go talk to talk to John Wall, talk to this person, and it'll connect you. So that we thought if we're using a platform, we should use an AI powered platform. So we're testing out some things. So I'm so excited about that, just to see people and start to build this community a little bit more. And then two, just some of the sessions, I think one of the things that I keep asking a lot, which I'm probably driving everyone crazy, is just okay, we talk a lot about the what is marketing AI and why you should be doing it, but I'm just like, how do you do it? Show me how to do it. And so I think, one between our AI and action sessions that are happening next week, along with some of our breakout sessions, it really is diving into the how are you doing it? How can we be doing it? And that will answer my question of should we be doing it right now? Or what do we need? What position do we need to be in to be able to start doing this on our own, or with a partner to help us? So I think that's going to answer a lot of the questions for some folks. And then some of the other sessions, we talked about Karen's. Cade Metz is our closing keynote, and he wrote the book Genius Makers, which was a really, really fascinating read on the world of AI, from Google and Facebook and DeepMind through now, and how that whole industry has evolved. And to your point, there was a lot of white men 30 years ago, 40 years ago, doing 50 years ago, doing all this, and look where we are today. So the industry's evolved. There's a lot of the whys and how we got from this point to this point. And he's the technology correspondent for the New York Times, and he's written for Wired magazine. So a lot of his stuff has just been really great to read. And he was actually one of the people that Paul started following first, that got him into this whole marketing AI space. So he's doing the closing keynote, and then just some Matthew Sweezy will be there. He was supposed to keynote last year, and we know how 2020 went, so that didn't happen. But he's going to come back for this one, and he's always brilliant to listen to and so great to listen to. He's really good at taking something strategic and bringing it to a tactical level, so you can really understand it and figure out, like, okay, this is something that I really understand, and as a marketing leader can take to my team on things we should be doing, or things we should, how we should be approaching our marketing strategy. And then there's lots of in
Awesome.
between. Yeah.
Awesome. I have a question here from Dr. Ashley Lydiard asking, what aspects of marketing have higher activity of AI?
I think right now content creation has been the biggest one that I've seen. And there is a state of the industry report on our website. I think it's just I should know this off the top of my head. Stateofmarketingai.com. There was a report that would answer some of those questions.
Okay. I know from our own experience, we have seen the attribution modeling by far probably uses the most models and data. at least for what companies are selling or building. Like the new Google Analytics 4 has
Right.
some brand new attribution modeling that I have some questions to the Google team about what they're using on the back end. Uh, and I know SEO has a ton of machine learning really being used right now, where it's like you said, content creation. It is also very much analysis, like people trying to
Hmm.
reverse engineer search results and figure out, well, what are the factors that correlate most to the known outcomes. When you look at the people doing data analysis on search results and ranking positions and things, there's a tremendous amount of data, and because it's all in reasonably good condition, you can build models on it. I think those are the things that I've seen where people are using more complex stuff, but there's not as much of it as I would have thought there would have been, because again, there's not that many people who can sit down and say, "Okay, take, your Google Search Console data and let's, run it through a gradient boosting algorithm, and see what are the variable importance factors that go with these things." Um, there's not as many folks that can do that, and there's not a lot of off the shelf stuff that I've seen that does that well, because everybody's data is different and really messy.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. So how many, and I'm interviewing the interviewer right now. So
All right.
how many CMOs and marketing leaders do you think are reluctant to dive into that because they don't want people to see that things are messy?
More than we think, and certainly more than anyone's willing to admit.
Right.
We had a client a couple of years ago. Their marketing team was forbidden to see any data from sales. We're like, how do you make decisions? Sales just tells us, yes, that's, things are good, or no, things are bad. And I'm like, why? And, a couple of years later, it turns out that sales was so bad at their job. Like they closed like 1% of the leads they got, and the chief sales officer didn't want anybody to see just how bad things were.
Yeah. I mean, you think a good market or good leader would say, this is not my area of expertise. I need help. But, if someone's been in a role for, for a long time, or they're like, I don't want anyone to see that we've been kind of muddling our way through this for so long. You and I talked about that a couple of years ago, and I'm like, I need help on some stuff. Um,
It's hard for people to ask for help.
right.
It's hard for people to admit they don't know something, but especially if they're in a leadership position where whoever their stakeholders are expect them to know things, to put your hand up and say, I have no idea what that thing is, but I'm gonna go find out about it, is very difficult.
Right.
Follow-up question here. When you talk, say, content creation, are you talking more granular customer segmentation, like specific content for specific people, personalization?
Again, I'm still learning, but I mean, that's a great way to look at it. We're talking a little bit about, I just did it. We're doing some ad copy for different functions within marketing. Um, it's a great way to use a tool if you have the data. I was talking more about just like legit content creation, but blog posts, articles, social media posts, things like that. And I think I keep going back to that because I think it's a very tangible thing to see the results of. So that might just be a good place for a lot of people just to look at it. We used one tool called hyperwrite.ai. I'm not endorsing them. We have no affiliation with them. We used them, but it was like, okay, here's what you plugged in and here's what came out. It was just a very easy thing to see. Wow, look at that. It turned out pretty cool. Um, so I think just seeing what AI can do with a small amount of data versus a large amount of data, has been pretty fascinating to see like what AI can do.
Yeah, I'd agree. Personalization is relatively easy in terms of like recommendations, content recommendations, and creating content that's targeted towards certain audiences. The folks who are demand based, who we've worked with relatively recently, have a lot of systems like that will recommend content that has a higher propensity for somebody to buy. A third question here is, how do you sell AI and machine learning to leadership that either are unfamiliar with it or opposed to it?
Like send them to MACON September 13th and 14th. I'm just joking. I'm not really joking. I'm not really joking at all. Um, so again, this is a little bit of a sales pitch, but we have these sessions starting next week called AI in Action. And what they are there are 6 webinars, so Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday over the next 2 weeks, and we're actually talking about, showing AI in action. So the creative example that I was talking about, there's this company, Celtra. So they took one of their customers, and they've got some pretty big name B2C customers, and they took some of their creative and they ran it through their system, and here was the output, and you could see it, and it was like, this is what AI did the first time we did it. Then the next campaign we did this, and here was the outcome. Um, so it's not a demo, but it really goes into the tactical. Show me how your AI is working, and what's the AI doing that another technology can't do. So I think a lot of those, just visualizing some of those things. I don't know about you, but I'm a very visual learner. So me seeing it, I'm like, aha. Or, getting an actual use case is just really beneficial. I think some of the things like the state of the industry report, whether it's ours or whether it's somebody else's, just having them see what other companies are doing, having them see what your competitors are doing, um, having them, like, if there's something that your company is spending a lot of time doing one thing, could we just pilot AI on this one project, and just so we can see how it's working. I think some things like that, just without taking your whole entire budget and trying to put it towards something, and just saying, can I just have a little bit of a portion just so I can show you this one thing? I think that's a very easy, low cost, low, you're not locked into something longer term way to show people something.
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, leadership cares about 3 things, right? Is it gonna save me time? Is it gonna save me money? Is it gonna make me money? I
Yeah.
remember, when I was starting a data science initiative at my last agency, the agency owner said, "How the are you gonna make me money?" Like, that was the blunt question in the interview. It's like, "Well, we can resell these services." And where I think a lot of folks, myself included, my hand is totally up, is we don't spend enough time figuring out, okay, well, here's like what you're going to get. Like you're going to improve your ROI on your ad spend by 14%, right? So if you want 14% more results for your ad dollar, use this system rather than this system. Or like in your case, your team's going to spend half the time creating creative variations. So it'll really help your marketing move faster. And I think that's something they can wrap their brains around, is say, okay, you're gonna make me more money. Cool.
Right.
I can deal with that. And because they don't, honestly, a lot of the stakeholders I've talked to, they don't really care. They could be a box full of gerbils, with some wires coming in and out, and they wouldn't care what was in the box. It was fairies, gerbils, AI, you know, uh, aliens from outer space. As long as when they put $1 in the machine, more than $1 comes out. That's really all they care about.
Yeah, for sure.
So, well, thanks for the great questions. Thanks for the great conversation today. If you've got comments or questions and things you want to follow up with afterwards, pop on over to our free Slack group or trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers, where you can ask Kathy, who's in that Slack, along with 1,900 other folks, about your questions around artificial intelligence, machine learning, and also just like, how do we do this thing? And if you'd like to read more about this stuff on a regular basis, pop on over to our free newsletter. Go to trustinsights.ai/newsletter. And hopefully we'll see you at the Marketing AI Conference, September 13th and 14th. Go to maycon.ai. And if you'd like to learn more about Kathy and the Institute, you can go to marketingaiinstitute.com. Kathy, thanks for coming and hanging out for
Yeah.
almost an hour today. And
Thank
look
you
forward
so
to seeing
much.
you at Maycon.
Yes, for sure. Thanks, Chris.